Eric Murphy had lived on his property for over a decade, long before the sprawling, uniform homes of the Oak Ridge Homeowners Association had encroached on his land. When he first bought it, the area had been nothing more than open fields and scattered farmhouses, untouched by the rigid rules of a homeowners association. His land, a peaceful 2-acre retreat, sat on the outskirts of the new community, a glaring reminder of independence in a neighborhood obsessed with conformity. He had no interest in selling, no matter how much the homeowners association expanded or how many times their members tried to push their policies onto him. But Homeowners Association President Karen Fields had other plans. Karen had been running the Oak Ridge Homeowners Association with an iron fist for the past 3 years. Under her leadership, the association had become notorious for its draconian rules, grass length regulations, specific shades of paint homeowners were allowed to use, and even a rule dictating the acceptable placement of patio furniture. She thrived on control, and nothing irked her more than Eric's property sitting untouched and unregulated right next to her neighborhood. It was an eyesore in her mind, a rogue piece of land that had no business existing outside of homeowners association jurisdiction. So when the board decided they wanted to expand Oak Ridge's community space with a park and picnic area, Karen knew exactly where it should go. She had convinced herself that Eric's property was wasted potential and that sooner or later, he'd have no choice but to sell. One late afternoon, as Eric sat on his porch with a cold beer in hand, he spotted Karen approaching. She walked with purpose, a stiff smile plastered across her face, holding a folder neatly tucked under one arm. Eric sighed. He already knew where this was going. "Good evening, Eric," Karen greeted, stopping just shy of his porch steps. Her voice was sickly sweet, the kind of forced politeness that set off alarm bells. Eric leaned back in his chair, nodding slightly. Karen didn't wait for an invitation to continue. "I won't take up much of your time," she assured, pulling out a paper from the folder. "The Homeowners Association Board has been discussing ways to improve the community, and we have a wonderful opportunity for you." Eric raised an eyebrow. "That's so." Karen's eyes glimmered with excitement. "Yes, we'd love to make you an offer on your property. The association is expanding our community green space, and your land would be perfect for a small park and a family picnic area. Just imagine, a space where children can play safely, where families can gather, all thanks to your generosity." She slid the paper toward him. "We're prepared to make a very fair offer." Eric didn't bother picking up the paper. Instead, he took another sip of his beer and let a bead of silence stretch between them before finally speaking. "I'm not selling, Karen." Karen's smile faltered just for a second before she quickly composed herself. "Oh, I understand. This is a big decision. But trust me, we've come up with an extremely generous package. In fact, we're offering you above market value. That's rare for any sale. You really should take a look." Eric shook his head. "Not interested." Karen's lips pressed into a thin line. "Eric, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. You're sitting on land that could benefit everyone. Think of the children. Think of the community. I'd hate to see you miss out on something so beneficial for everyone here." Eric chuckled under his breath. "Karen, you and I both know this isn't about the community. This is about you wanting control over something you can't have. My land isn't for sale. Not now, not ever." Karen's smile was gone now, replaced with a look of mild disbelief. She had expected some resistance, but not this level of immediate and unwavering refusal. She was used to people bending to them, hesitating to them, at least pretending to consider her offers. But Eric didn't even entertain the idea. "I understand your hesitation," she said, trying a softer approach. "But maybe you're not considering the long-term benefits. Your property is valuable, yes, but it requires upkeep. The taxes, the maintenance, the hassle of managing all this land. It adds up. And let's be honest, Eric, your property is sticking out in this community. It doesn't fit with the rest of Oak Ridge." Eric let out a dry laugh. "Exactly. That's the way I like it." Karen's nostrils flared slightly. "It would be a shame if you found yourself dealing with unnecessary difficulties. You know, when an area becomes more developed, it's easy for things to get complicated." Eric's eyes darkened. He recognized the thinly veiled threat for what it was. The homeowners association had no authority over his land, but that didn't mean Karen wouldn't try to make his life miserable in other ways. He'd seen it happen before. Homeowners associations finding loopholes, making complaints to the city, filing bogus reports to code enforcement just to harass homeowners into compliance. He set his beer down and stood up, towering over Karen. "I'll make this real simple for you, Karen. My land is not for sale. No matter what you offer, no matter what you try, no matter what games you play, I'm not selling. So you can take that paper and save yourself the trouble of coming back." Karen's expression hardened. She studied him for a moment, as if trying to determine whether he was bluffing. Then, with a forced chuckle, she tucked the paper back into her folder. "Well," she said, taking a step back, "that's disappointing to hear, but I respect your decision." Eric nodded. "Glad to hear it." Karen turned on her heel and started walking back toward the street. But just before she left, she glanced over her shoulder with a sly smirk. "You know, Eric, sometimes people don't realize how much of a burden their property can become until after they've made the wrong choice. I do hope you don't regret this." Eric watched as she disappeared down the sidewalk, her posture rigid, her movements a little too stiff for someone who had supposedly respected his decision. He let out a deep sigh, shaking his head. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. The first sign of trouble came 3 days after Eric had rejected Karen's offer. It was a crisp morning, the sun just beginning to rise, casting long shadows across his land. Eric had stepped outside with his usual cup of coffee, enjoying the quiet, when he noticed something unusual. A bright orange note was stuck to his mailbox. Frowning, he walked over and ripped it off, skimming the bold print at the top. Violation notice. Failure to maintain lawn aesthetics. Fine, $250. Eric let out a short, humorless laugh. This had to be a mistake. He wasn't even under the homeowners association's jurisdiction. He turned the paper over, half expecting it to be some kind of prank, but there it was, the official Oak Ridge Homeowners Association logo stamped in the corner. He wasn't even finished with his coffee before a second discovery soured his morning further. A small group of people stood at the edge of his property, staring at his house and murmuring among themselves. Some of them had clipboards. Eric recognized 1 or 2 neighbors from the Oak Ridge community, but not ones he had ever spoken to. Taking a slow sip of his coffee, Eric made his way toward them. The murmuring stopped as he approached, their gazes flicking between him and something they were clearly documenting. "Morning," Eric greeted, his voice calm but firm. "Something I can help you with?" One of the men, a balding guy with wire-rimmed glasses and an Oak Ridge Homeowners Association badge pinned to his polo, cleared his throat. "Just conducting a routine assessment," he said, as if that explained anything. Eric narrowed his eyes. "Assessment of what, exactly?" The man glanced down at his clipboard. "Your lawn, for one. It's not in compliance with community standards. The Homeowners Association has certain expectations, and, unfortunately," Eric cut him off with a sharp chuckle. "Let me stop you right there. I don't have to comply with your Homeowners Association's expectations. I'm not a member." The man blinked. "Excuse me." "You heard me," Eric said, crossing his arms. "This property isn't part of the Oak Ridge Homeowners Association. Never has been. I don't pay your fees, I don't follow your rules, and I sure as hell don't answer to your little assessments." The small group exchanged nervous glances. One woman leaned toward the man with the clipboard, whispering something. Eric caught the way the man's face twitched with irritation before he straightened his shoulders. "Well," the man said, clearly trying to recover, "that may be, but your property borders Homeowners Association land, and, as such, your upkeep impacts the visual harmony of the community. The Homeowners Association has the right to enforce basic standards on neighboring lots to maintain property values." Eric took a slow step forward, towering over the man. "That's so," he said, his voice dangerously calm. The man faltered. "Yes. And if violations aren't addressed, fines will be issued. The Homeowners Association has the authority to escalate unresolved issues to the county if necessary." Eric's jaw tightened. This wasn't just about a lawn. This was a power play, Karen's first move. He held the clipboard guy's gaze for a long, tense moment before letting out a deep sigh. All right, he said. You do what you gotta do, and I'll do what I gotta do. With that, he turned on his heel and walked back toward his house, leaving the group standing there, visibly uneasy. The next week, things escalated. First, it was the mailbox. One morning, Eric found it had been knocked clean off its post. The wooden base splintered as if it had been kicked or rammed with something heavy. He had to admit, it was a nice touch. There was no proof, no cameras, just a mysteriously destroyed mailbox that someone could argue was an accident. Then came the letters. Every other day, he found a new notice stuffed into his door frame. Some were about his unkempt lawn. Others claimed he had an unauthorized structure on his property, his shed, which had been there for years. He even got a warning for excessive outdoor storage, which he assumed referred to the pile of firewood he kept stacked near his fence. Each letter was signed, sealed, and delivered by the Homeowners Association. But the real kicker? The fake bills. Eric had just finished fixing his mailbox when he found a thick envelope in his mail. It was an invoice listing several months' worth of unpaid Homeowners Association dues, over $1,000 in total. At the bottom, a bright red warning. Failure to pay within 30 days will result in a lien being placed on your property. Eric exhaled sharply through his nose. He grabbed his phone and dialed the number at the bottom of the letter. A crisp, automated voice answered first, directing him through a maze of menu options before finally landing him on a human representative. This is Lisa with Oak Ridge Homeowners Association. How can I assist you today? Eric clenched his jaw. Yeah, I just got an invoice claiming I owe Homeowners Association dues. I don't. My property isn't under Homeowners Association control, so I'd love to know what kind of scam you're running. A short pause, then a patronizing chuckle. Sir, if you received a bill, it means you're responsible for those dues. Let me say it again. I am not part of your Homeowners Association. Well, that's not what our records show. Eric felt his pulse quicken. Oh, really? Then you should double-check because I never signed anything, never agreed to anything, never paid anything. I'm sorry, sir. We can't discuss individual cases over the phone, but if you believe there's been an error, you're welcome to dispute it in writing. Otherwise, the balance remains due. Click. Eric stared at his phone. They had hung up on him. This wasn't just harassment anymore. This was fraud. They were trying to force him under Homeowners Association control using every dirty trick they had. And knowing Karen, this was just the beginning. Eric took a deep breath, forcing himself to think. If Karen wanted a fight, she'd get one. But he wasn't going to play by her rules. If she thought he'd roll over and let the Homeowners Association push him out, she had no idea who she was dealing with. Eric barely had time to process the fake Homeowners Association bills before the next phase of Karen's plan kicked into high gear. 2 days after the phone call, he woke up to the sound of construction. It was early, too early for anyone to be running power tools, and the noise was coming from the edge of his property. When he stepped outside, still groggy from sleep, his eyes widened. A group of men in fluorescent vests were hammering a fresh wooden sign into the ground at the edge of his property. A sign that read, "Future site of Oak Ridge Community Park." Eric stared for a moment, wondering if he was still half asleep. But no, this was real. What the hell, he muttered, setting his coffee down on the porch railing before striding toward the workers. Hey, he barked. What do you think you're doing? One of the workers, a man with graying hair and a clipboard, barely looked up. Just putting the notice, sir. We're set to start ground prep next week. Eric clenched his jaw. You're on my land. The man looked up, blinking in confusion. This is Homeowners Association property, sir. Eric let out a sharp laugh, but there was no humor in it. No, it's not. The man frowned, flipping through the pages on his clipboard. Says right here this land is under Oak Ridge Homeowners Association jurisdiction. Eric took another step forward, his voice low and steady. Then your paperwork is either forged or just plain wrong. This land belongs to me. And if you so much as put another nail in the ground, you're trespassing. A long silence stretched between them. The workers exchanged nervous glances, suddenly unsure. Finally, the man with the clipboard sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. Look, we were just following orders. You got a problem? Take it up with the Homeowners Association. Oh, don't worry, Eric said, his voice dripping with restrained anger. I will. The workers hesitated for a moment before slowly gathering their tools. Eric yanked the wooden sign out of the ground himself, tossing it into the back of his truck before heading inside. He already knew who was behind this, and he was done playing nice. By the time Eric reached the Homeowners Association office, he was seeing red. The Oak Ridge Homeowners Association building sat at the edge of the community, a pristine brick structure that looked more like a law firm than a neighborhood office. Inside, everything was sterile, white walls artificial, plants, and a receptionist with an expression that screamed, "I hate my job." Eric didn't wait to be acknowledged. He strode straight to the counter, tossing the wooden sign onto the desk with a loud thud. "I need to speak with Karen," he said, his voice dangerously calm. The receptionist blinked at the sign, then at Eric. "Do you have an appointment?" "Appointment?" "No," he said, "but tell her Eric Murphy is here, and if she doesn't see me now, I'll be making a call to my lawyer instead." That did the trick. Less than a minute later, Karen appeared in the doorway, her usual smug expression firmly in place. "Eric," she said, feigning surprise. "I wasn't expecting you. To what do I owe the pleasure?" Eric clenched his fists. "Cut the act, Karen. I just caught your crew trying to stake claim to my land. Care to explain?" Karen's lips curled into a tight smile. "Oh, that? Just a misunderstanding. Our records show that your property was recently incorporated into the Oak Ridge Homeowners Association district. It must have been a clerical error on your end." Eric took a deep breath, forcing himself to stay calm. "Karen, we both know that's a lie. You have no legal authority over my land." Karen sighed dramatically. "Ah, that's debatable. The board voted to expand our jurisdiction to include bordering lots. It's all perfectly legitimate." Eric's eyes darkened. "The board doesn't have that power." "Actually," Karen said, tilting her head, "we do. Under the new Oak Ridge Community Planning Initiative, we were able to pass a motion that allows us to annex underdeveloped properties adjacent to homeowners association land, provided it benefits the community." Eric's jaw clenched. "So what? You just decided my land belonged to you." Karen gave a slow, deliberate nod. "In a manner of speaking, yes." Eric exhaled sharply. He had dealt with a lot of bureaucratic nonsense in his life, but this was outright theft. You do realize that what you're doing is illegal, right? You can't just claim land that isn't yours. Karen let out a soft chuckle. "Oh, Eric, you're thinking too small. This isn't about taking your land. It's about making the right choice for the community. You can fight us all you want, but the reality is this is happening. The county supports us. The board supports us. And soon, even the courts will see things our way. It's only a matter of time." Eric could feel his blood pressure rising. "You're insane if you think I'm going to let you steal my property." Karen sighed, shaking her head. "That's the thing, Eric. It doesn't have to be this difficult. You can make this easy for both of us. We're still offering you a generous buyout, more than your land is worth, frankly. Take the deal, and you walk away with money in your pocket." Eric let out a dry laugh. "You really think I'm going to let you bully me into selling?" Karen's smile faded. "I think you're making a mistake." Eric met her gaze without flinching. "And I think you've underestimated just how stubborn I can be." A flicker of irritation crossed Karen's face before she quickly masked it with indifference. "Fine," she said, voice clipped. "Then we'll do this the hard way." Eric leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. "You better believe we will." Without another word, he turned on his heel and walked out of the office, slamming the door behind him. He had hoped Karen would back off, that maybe, just maybe, she'd see that he wasn't going to roll over. But now she had made it clear. She wasn't going to stop until she got what she wanted. Eric had no choice. It was time to prepare for war. Eric had dealt with a lot of homeowners association nonsense in the past few weeks, but nothing could have prepared him for the stunt Karen pulled next. It was a little past noon when he heard the loud thud of something heavy hitting his front porch. Frowning, he set down his wrench. He'd been in the middle of reinforcing his mailbox post, just in case the homeowners association tried anything again, and wiped the sweat off his forehead before heading toward the sound. A thick envelope sat at the foot of his door, the kind of legal-looking package that never brought good news. The Oak Ridge Homeowners Association logo was stamped in the corner in bold blue letters. Eric sighed. Already knowing this was another one of Karen's games. He picked up the envelope, ripped it open, and scanned the contents. His stomach tightened. Notice of community property transfer. The document claimed that, as of that morning, Eric's land was now officially part of the Oak Ridge Homeowners Association jurisdiction. Not a suggestion, not a request, a done deal. The papers even referenced a supposed agreement with the county, though no such agreement had ever been signed by Eric. At the bottom was a final warning. Failure to comply with Oak Ridge Homeowners Association guidelines will result in legal enforcement and removal from the premises. Eric clenched his jaw so hard it ached. Karen wasn't just harassing him anymore. She was outright fabricating legal claims. He grabbed his phone and dialed the number listed at the bottom of the letter, not even bothering to mask the fury in his voice. When the line connected, "This is Eric Murphy. I just got a letter saying my land is part of your homeowners association now. Care to explain this outright fraud." The receptionist stammered something about new policies and community improvements. But Eric wasn't in the mood for scripted corporate nonsense. "Put me through to Karen." Now, a few seconds of muffled background noise. Then, Karen's too smooth voice came through. "Eric, always a pleasure." "You're insane if you think this is going to work," Eric growled. "You can't claim my land just because you want to. I don't care what paperwork you forge. I don't care what fake votes you hold. This is illegal." Karen sighed, as if he were the unreasonable one. "Eric, this is a simple administrative transition. Nothing personal. The county approved our request to incorporate adjacent lots into homeowners association management. Your land was included. It's for the benefit of everyone." Eric let out a sharp laugh. "You expect me to believe that? You really think the county is going to back you when I take this to court?" A long pause. Then Karen's voice dropped into something colder. "Eric, I strongly advise you not to make this difficult." Eric was about to fire back when something outside caught his attention. A black SUV had pulled up in front of his driveway, its tinted windows making it impossible to see inside. 2 seconds later, another car followed. A police cruiser. Eric's grip tightened around his phone. "Karen, what did you do?" A note of amusement entered her voice. "Oh, didn't I mention? You're currently trespassing on homeowners association property." Eric went still. "You called the cops on me," he said slowly, barely able to keep his voice steady. "I had no choice," Karen replied, mock sympathy dripping from every word. "You refused to cooperate, and as a homeowners association officer, I have a duty to ensure our community remains safe and orderly. Since you refused to vacate after official notice, I had to escalate the matter." Eric barely heard her anymore. His focus was on the cruiser as 2 uniformed officers stepped out, adjusting their belts. One of them said something into his radio before both started walking up the driveway. This was happening. Karen had actually called the cops on him. Eric took a deep breath, squared his shoulders, and walked to meet them halfway. He had nothing to hide, but he also knew how quickly situations like this could spiral out of control. The older of the 2 officers, a stocky guy with a mustache, gave Eric a slow once-over before speaking. "Afternoon, sir. We got a call about an unauthorized occupant refusing to leave homeowners association property." Eric let out a sharp breath. "You mean my property?" The officer's brow furrowed slightly. "According to the report, this land has been annexed under the Oak Ridge Homeowners Association, and you've been notified to vacate." Eric could feel his pulse in his ears. "Officer, this is my land. I've owned it for over 10 years. The Homeowners Association has no legal claim to it, no matter what paperwork they try to push." The officer exchanged a glance. With his partner, a younger guy who had been quietly listening, the officer asked, "Do you have proof of ownership?" The younger one asked. Eric didn't hesitate. "Inside, I have my property deed, mortgage records, and tax receipts." The older officer nodded. "All right, let's see them." Eric turned toward the house, but before he could take more than a step, a sharp voice called out, "That won't be necessary, officers." Karen was standing at the edge of the driveway now, arms crossed, lips curled in a victorious smile. "This is a waste of time," she continued smoothly. "The Homeowner Association Board has already processed the transfer. The paperwork is with the county. He's just stalling." The officers hesitated. Eric took a slow breath before turning fully to face them. "You don't have to take my word for it," he said evenly. "Check with the county land records office. I guarantee you'll find that the deed still has my name on it." Karen's smile tightened. For a long moment, the officers stood there, weighing their options. Finally, the older one let out a small sigh and turned to his partner. "Call it in." Karen's eyes flashed. "You don't need to waste resources on." "We do," the officer interrupted. "This is a property dispute. We're not going to remove anyone until we verify the claim." Eric fought the urge to smirk. He watched as a younger officer stepped away, radioing dispatch to check county records. Karen was still standing stiffly, her face carefully composed, but Eric could see it now. The subtle clench of her jaw, the slight twitch in her fingers. She knew she was losing. Minutes passed. Then, the younger officer returned, holding his radio in one hand. "County records confirm the deed is still in Mr. Murphy's name," he reported. Karen's mouth opened, then shut. The older officer turned to her. "Ma'am, unless you have an official court order stating otherwise, this is still his private property." Karen let out a forced laugh, shaking her head. "This is ridiculous. The paperwork must not have been updated yet." The officer cut her off. "That's not how it works." He turned back to Eric. "Sorry for the trouble, sir. You're free to go about your day." Eric nodded. "Appreciate it." Karen took a step forward. "But I'd suggest," the officer interrupted firmly, looking directly at her, "that the homeowner association cease any further attempts to harass this property owner. Otherwise, Mr. Murphy will have full legal grounds to file charges for harassment and fraudulent claims." Karen's face went pale. Eric met her gaze, giving her the smallest, most satisfied smirk he could manage. This round, he had won, but he knew Karen wouldn't stop. And next time, he'd be ready. Eric had won the battle, but he knew the war wasn't over. Karen had been humiliated in front of the police, her fabricated claim to his property dismissed in minutes. But she wasn't the type to accept defeat gracefully. Sure enough, the very next morning, a stack of homeowner association violation notices was taped to his front door. The sheer absurdity of the allegations made Eric laugh out loud. Unauthorized structure on property, his shed again. Failure to comply with mandatory landscaping standards. His grass was trimmed, but apparently not Karen approved. And even a public nuisance complaint with no further explanation. It was pathetic, really. She was grasping at straws, trying to wear him down, hoping that constant harassment would eventually make him give up. Eric shook his head, crumpling the papers in his hand. If Karen thought he'd be intimidated by more empty threats, she was about to learn just how wrong she was. He went inside, set down his coffee, and pulled out his laptop. It was time to go on the offensive. The first thing he did was file a formal complaint with the county record office, notifying them that the Oak Ridge Homeowner Association was attempting fraudulent annexation of private property. He provided copies of all the fake bills, the illegal notices, and even a transcript of his conversation with the police officers. Then he took it a step further. Using public records, he started digging into the homeowner association's finances. He wasn't an accountant, but even a casual review of their annual reports showed something shady. Excessive administrative fees, unexplained budget surpluses, and emergency funds that had never been disclosed to residents. It was exactly the kind of thing that could blow up in their faces if it got into the right hands. Within a week, the cracks in Karen's carefully controlled empire began to show. It started with a petition, one Eric had discreetly circulated among the residents of Oak Ridge. Many of them had already been growing resentful of the homeowner association's authoritarian rule, but few had dared to speak out. Now, emboldened by Eric's resistance, they started signing their names, demanding a full audit of the homeowner association's finances and leadership. Karen, of course, tried to squash it. She sent cease and desist letters to Eric, claiming he was spreading misinformation. She tried to hold emergency meetings to reaffirm her control over the board. But it was too late. The police had already flagged the homeowner association for fraudulent property claims, and when county officials started their own investigation into the homeowner association's financials, the local news picked up the story. Eric hadn't expected it to go viral, But once it did, there was no stopping it. The headline hit the town like a bomb. Oak Ridge Homeowner Association president under investigation for property fraud and financial misconduct. Karen's face was plastered on every local news site, caught in a candid photo looking exactly as smug and entitled as she was in real life. The article detailed how she had fabricated property annexations, illegally issued fines, and mismanaged homeowner association funds to the tune of thousands of dollars. By the end of the week, the county launched a full-scale investigation. Residents started coming forward with their own horror stories: wrongful foreclosures, sudden fee hikes, even harassment over minor infractions. The Oak Ridge Homeowner Association, once feared and obeyed, was now in complete disarray. Then came the lawsuits. Several homeowners filed class action suits against the Homeowner Association, seeking compensation for years of wrongful fines and property violations. Eric's case, attempted land theft, was at the top of the list. Karen tried one last desperate move. A week after the scandal broke, Eric saw her SUV pull up outside his driveway. But this time, there were no smug smiles, no fake pleasantries. She stormed up to his porch, eyes wild, hands shaking with barely restrained rage. "You did this," she hissed, jabbing a finger at him. Eric leaned against his porch railing, completely unfazed. "No, got in. You did this to yourself." She let out a bitter laugh, shaking her head. "You think you've won? You think they won't just replace me and keep running things the same way?" Eric tilted his head. "Maybe, but you won't be there to see it." Karen's jaw tightened. For the first time, Eric saw fear in her eyes. And then, before she could say another word, her phone rang. She stared at the screen for a long moment before answering. Eric couldn't hear the conversation, but the way her face drained of color told him everything he needed to know. The Homeowner Association board had just voted her out. Karen hung up the call, swallowed hard, and turned away. She left without another word. Karen was gone, but Eric wasn't done yet. With her removed from power, the remaining Homeowner Association board members were forced to negotiate with the homeowners. The ridiculous fines were revoked, the fraudulent property claims were dropped, and, most importantly, Oak Ridge Homeowner Association was permanently barred from expanding its jurisdiction beyond its existing lots. Eric kept his land, every inch of it, and just to make sure Karen never forgot, he put up a new sign at the edge of his property. Big, bold, impossible to ignore. Private property, not Homeowner Association territory, just in case the next Karen got any ideas.